So I want to welcome to the podcast Professor McGlothlin and
Oh,
Mike Lafferty. Hey guys.
hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
thank
Well, yeah, of course. I want to welcome both of you uh, to the podcast. I Before I get started, I kind of just wanted our listeners to know a little bit more about you, Professor, where you grew up, how did you get into horror, and
you.
what your day-to-day looks like now.
Well, I have lived most of my life in various spots in rural Virginia. I lived my early days in that part of Virginia that's still technically Virginia, but it's really kind of West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. And I got into horror mainly because I was my mom's 18th birthday present and
Hmm.
loved my parents to death. They were just blatantly kind of making up the whole parenting thing as they were going along. And as
Hmm.
part of that, they didn't think anything of taking me to the drive-in when they probably shouldn't have, and showing me movies that I probably shouldn't have seen, because
Hmm.
literally my first cinematic memory is at age 4 seeing Vincent Price in Theater of Blood, with a vivid memory of where he gets even with the theater critic by holding him down and force feeding him his two beloved dogs until he chokes to death on them.
I'm
And
pretty sure this.
I started thinking like, you don't get this on Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just sort of spiraled from there. I guess it's something about being when you're trapped in this dying rural coal town. The thought that there's anything more alive and more vivid than what you know is it's just so attractive.
Yeah, I it's funny because one of the an upcoming episode that I have is going to be released in October. It's going to be just introduction to horror for
Ooh.
a lot of folks that have I've asked a lot of my friends to submit 1 to 2 minute audio clips that I'll just insert into the podcast where they talk a little bit about what was their first introduction to horror. And a lot of folks have been telling me like, "Oh, Lion King," and I was like, "Lion King," but I guess it could be scary to some folks. But for me, I guess I always say this same thing I've mentioned in a previous podcast, but my intro to horror was probably Friday the 13th, honestly. My mom would just have it playing, and my mom would do this thing where she would just hit record on a VHS,
Oh, oh,
uh, be recording something, and she would just pop it in. And I remember this one time we are on the living room, and she was in the kitchen just cooking, and all six of us, because there were six kids,
wow.
we were watching this movie called Happy Hell Night. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but it's very not appropriate for children. There's like sex scenes, decapitations. It's a very morbid movie, especially as kids. That's how we got introduced
Yeah.
to horror.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can picture the VHS box, and I've never seen it, but I can picture.
No, not even a VHS box. My mom would just pop in a VHS cassette, hit record for anything that was playing overnight, and
Bless
then
her.
just have us watching random stuff. And my mom was low key into horror a little
Oh.
bit. Awesome. So this is how you mentioned you got into horror, where you came
Mhm.
from. What does your current day-to-day look like right now? I know that you're working on the Kickstarter, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yes, yes. Well, to pay the bills, I'm in my 30th year of teaching Intro to Poli Sci to extremely bright young people
Hmm.
who have already begun to change the world positively. If you're depressed about the present, be hopeful for the future, because I
Yeah.
have seen it and it is beautiful. And then on my off days, I am the creative pit boss of Ghost Show Press, which is a small but mighty voice for independent creators. And mainly, we do quirky books about films that we feel are out of the ordinary. We live in
Hmm.
an age where unless the nitrate has burned, you can pretty much see it these days. And
Yeah.
you're just sort of lost in all of it. There isn't the curation that we had back in the 70s and 80s. So our goal is to take a cinematic genre and talk about films that stand out for some reason. They
Hmm.
broke the accepted rules of the genre, or they established them. Or, as I say, it's like, if you want to see what a cliche was like before it became a cliche, watch this film.
Yeah.
I employ between 30 and 40 writers with very diverse voices and points of view. And we try to walk you through a genre, and people who've read them, seem to find a lot to like. We come at you with a lot of different styles. It's hard for me to imagine if you're into like horror or sci-fi, whatever genre book you're into, you can't find something in there that to not to like, because we hit you from every possible direction.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And that was actually one of my questions is just about Ghost Show Press. I do see somebody is coming into the chat. I think it's Mike Weatherford.
Yes, one of my
Weatherford.
writers.
Okay, awesome. I'll admit them. Um, and awesome. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, this is going to get confusing.
You
Oh
guys can
yeah,
make
yeah,
fun of
that's
them
true.
free.
I'll call him Mac, based on his screen name here.
Can we call one of you Bruce just to cut down on the confusion?
I don't know why.
Just Bruce,
Mr. Weatherford, are you there, sir?
Mr.
Hi
Weatherford.
there. Yeah, I had to restart because I wasn't getting video the first time. Now it looks like I do.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
welcome to the podcast.
Hey,
It was
thanks.
just
Yeah.
yeah, I was just talking with the professor. Would it be cool if we just call you the professor or
Oh,
Professor
please,
McG?
please,
Like
please,
Very Gilligan silent.
please. My grandfather was a moonshiner. Every time I hear professor, it's a reminder that my family has upgraded so much in just 2, 3 generations.
Yeah.
He had a shotgun. I have tenure.
There you go. Yeah, almost the same thing. Um, but I want to ask Mike Lafferty. I'm not sure. I know that the professor was mentioning earlier that you were more of like kind of like the heart and soul, I guess you could say, of the company, and that you are like helping with marketing and everything. Are you into horror, or are you just there as a somebody who just happens to be around it because of your coworkers and friends?
I do like horror. I got dragged into it by my wife. I mean, I've always kind of dabbled. Probably my favorite horror movie is it's very, very vanilla for you guys, but Blair Witch Project, the original one.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought into the marketing. I walked into it halfway thinking maybe it was real. But yeah, I'm into that. What I really love about Chris's project is, him and his band of writers, including Mr. Weatherford, they're doing thoughtful, long form analysis of horror movies. And that sometimes, I mean, back in the old days, you could turn on PBS and watch the fat guy and the skinny guy talking about movies with some depth and some insight. But we don't always get that with, in the internet media days. There's a lot
Yeah.
of very short listicles and AI articles. And so this is something that, maybe you used to get from, you open the newspaper and read a longer review, and you don't have that so much anymore. So that's why I really like his projects. And as he says, I'm kind of the guy behind the scenes. I'm like Scooter on the Muppets. I'm kind of keeping the whole thing. I don't get on stage much. I don't write the essays myself, but I kind of keep things moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, no,
He's Scooter, especially in the sense that the whole thing would fall apart without him.
yeah, there you go. I grew up around the Blair Witch Project as well. I was in high school when it came out. That was like not pre-internet. Obviously, it came out during the age of the internet and everything. But I do remember talking to our friends like, is this real, is this not real, and me coming out of the theaters like, this can't be real, because they would not show real deaths uh on TV. But then again, back then, what do you know, right? So that's a really good choice. And Mike, aka Bruce, as they mentioned, how did you get into horror, and do you have a favorite film that you want to, I guess, give a shout out to?
Me or other Mike?
Mike Weatherford, you're up.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, I'm a total monster kid. I'm a tail end boomer, but I'm squarely, well, not squarely at the tail end of that whole kind of late night creature feature and famous
Hmm.
monsters of Filmland magazine and just Aurora monster models. So I grew up, with this fascination with the Universal monsters and Hammer, and that never really quit. Like in the early '70s, it kind of started to come into our living room with the Night Stalker and the 2 TV movies, and then the series, and then the CBS late movies started running the Hammer Dracula and Frankenstein movies, and that just kind of propelled me into when single screen theaters and drive-ins would run these kind of perpetual re-releases and repackage and sometimes even retitle different
Yeah.
horror movies. So it just kind of kept going. I don't know. I don't think I'm totally unusual for somebody my age, but maybe to hang on to it as long as I have, maybe that's the unusual part.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will always judge us for liking horror movies or horror literature or art or music or whatever. And it really is just like any other genre. I mean, like if you're gonna be weird about us watching horror, then I'm gonna be weird about you just enjoying war movies. Like, like what is the reason for trying to judge somebody for watching specific types of, or certain subgenres of anything. Um Professor, I know that you had mentioned
Yes.
previously on a different podcast that you were named after Christopher Lee.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of Christopher Lee films.
Yes.
Is there a specific, or is a well, first let me take a step back. Is this how you got your appreciation for Hammer films?
Uh, I think it was probably solidified by the fact that my dad was always a big horror film,
Hmm.
hence what I got named. My father and I are extremely different people, but we can connect on the monsters.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah, I think that was just probably a definite connection there.
Got it. What do you think is your favorite non Hammer Christopher Lee film?
Non-Hammer Christopher. I'd tear off the head my two favorite non-Hammer scenes.
Hmm.
He did a very, very, very low rent superhero parody in 1981 called The Return of Captain Invincible.
Okay.
And it's Alan Arkin from Catch 22 as this superhero that was big in the 50s but fell apart due to alcoholism. And Christopher Lee is his eternal arch foe. And there's a scene where he's come out of retirement to take him down. And Christopher Lee unveils this gigantic bar with every type of liquor known to man.
Yeah.
And Lee goes into a song and dance number written by Richard O'Brien of Rocky Horror fame, with
Hmm.
dancing girls and everything. And it's you will never see Christopher Lee having more fun at any on camera by anywhere. The man is just having the time of his life, and it's infectious as he's trying to tempt this guy into drinking again, and he's having such a gleefully evil time.
Are you sure it's not a cut from The Wicker Man or something? He did the same thing there. Like he's like dancing around. There's like naked women. If I remember correctly. I could be wrong.
Oddly enough, in a cutscene, it was Nicolas Cage that got the song and dance
Oh
number in
God, no, never
there.
mind. I mean, I like
And
Nicolas Cage, but
Didn't get us kicked out now.
not the
yeah,
remake.
and my other favorite is around
Hmm.
around the same time. Um, Lee did this forgotten film called Serial, and
Okay.
it was like you put every early 80s, late 70s cliche into a blender. It's like going to encounter groups and sitting in hot tubs and the main character has the boss from hell, played appropriately by Christopher Lee, who's like
Hmm.
constantly writing him about what a failure he is and how how he hasn't really achieved anything in life. But he finds out later on that when his boss isn't making his life his living hell on the weekends, his boss is the head of a gay biker gang.
Oh, sounds like right up my alley.
So Christopher Lee is a gay biker again, just absolutely embracing the role. And I won't spoil it because it is worth looking up. But he ends the movie with the single most hilarious line I have ever heard a human being utter, and it's only because it's Christopher Lee delivering it. And I
Yeah,
won't say any
you
more, but
won't spoil it. Yeah,
no, no,
I
but
mean, I
yes.
haven't. I can already picture it, but I'm thinking like a way a movie ends that's like really ridiculous. A recent movie at least
Hmm?
was Long Legs, and Nicolas Cage just saying like
Yes.
"Hail Satan," and then he just like winks and kisses the camera. That was a little out there. Um, but awesome.
Wow.
So yeah, I did want to get now a little bit into the other part, which is talking about your previous book. Which thank you for sending that to me, the PDF copy. I went through a lot of it. But as I mentioned earlier, I was listening to his podcast that you were previously on,
Oh,
and you said that you got this idea during COVID. Obviously, we were
yes.
all trapped at home, unable to
Yes.
do anything, go out for anything. Can you talk a little bit about how you conceived this idea and how you decided to bring in 30 plus folks to write about horror movies that broke the rules?
Well, I had parted ways with my previous publisher, and it's something that needed to be done. But I was sort of after being with one company for so long doing one thing, I just felt a little lost as to what I was going to do. I mean, I knew I wanted to write. I just wasn't really sure, and I knew I wanted to write something different, but that there was no. I guess I needed my own little version of these books. I needed some direction with all these infinite possibilities, and I just kept noticing that all my really talented writer friends were consuming all this media and writing all these brilliant, funny, insightful analysis for free.
Yeah.
And then it was finally my dear friend, publishing legend Jim Lauder, who just offhandedly mentioned that, hey, I was going through some old files and I found an essay on the Witchfinder General for an anthology that never got published. And the light bulb went off like, wait, Jim, you have an unpublished Witchfinder General essay? We could go down to the barn and put on a show, and we could all bring our horror movie essays, and that's where the genius stopped. Because I remember my next thought was, and all we'll need to do, we could all get like 5 friends to donate, and it'll fund in 24 hours.
That easy, right?
Yeah, so you see why I leave the marketing to Mike. You see why like anything involving like money or reality, I defer
Mhm.
to him. But Mike has been such a great support in his knowledge and his wisdom, and just the fact that when I pitched it to him, that he was so calm. Yeah, we can get this done. We can make this work. And then lo and behold, we're on our 4th book, and that one little light bulb moment has carried me through the most joyous moments of my writing career, and in many cases the most joyous moments I've had on this planet.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear. I know that you mentioned you had 3 books already published, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken. One of them
Yes.
was called Fantastic or Flops.
Yes.
I'm very curious about that book, but I'll look it up and I'll share it on social media, all
Thank you.
your books. But I want to turn to Mike Weatherford. Are you part of the second book that's coming out, or were you also part of the first book? Because I don't remember if I saw your name on the first one.
I've been in 2 of the first 3. I wasn't in the first one, and I was in the
Mhm.
sci-fi book and in Fantastic Flops.
Yeah,
So
Fantastic
I,
Flops.
yeah, and Fantastic Flops. I'm glad you're going to check that out. That's the sci-fi book. It's I don't know if I should say it's what you expect because I don't really know, but it's kind of this scholarly deep dive into these films and seeing them from new angles. And Flops, it's like I was kind of surprised when I read the other people's essays how personal it is, how people really adopt these so-called bad movies or these forgotten movies, and they get really passionate about them. That is, I mean, like I'm an insider outsider. I contribute my essay, but it's not till it comes out that I get to read what everybody else wrote. And
That
the
makes
first 2
sense.
essays are about Curse of the Cat people, and I'm like, oh, Professor, kind of you messed up here. And then you read them, and it's like, okay, so it's the sort of forgotten sequel to the very famous cat people, but we have 2 essays about it, and you read them both, and they're both amazing, and they're both like really personal about to the writer, and the writer really explains why this movie is so important.
Yeah, that's interesting because I I'm not as a huge of a, sci-fi person. Yes, I've seen some sci-fi films, especially like sci-fi horror,
Mhm.
or as they call it, cosmic horror, I guess, for some folks. But um, I know that Professor, you were talking about, and again, when I say talking, I'm referencing previous interviews that you've done, is where sometimes people suggest a specific title that you're like, I'm not sure this is gonna fit, but then they come in and they start talking about how I guess it makes sense.
Yes, I on the first transgressive horror, I got to meet the outstanding film professor Craig Fisher, and he asked, "Well, what would you be interested in doing, sir?" Me ready to say yes to anything, and he says, "I want to do a Jean-Luc Godard film."
Hmm.
Was like very sheepishly going like, you saw the name of the book, right? And he's like, no, 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 I'm going to convince you that Godard made a horror film, he without even meaning to.
Yeah,
So yeah, right there in the first volume, why Jean-Luc Godard has a horror film on his resume.
yeah.
And in the most recent one, one of my longtime contributors, John Polizak, sold me that he could do Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And
Mm.
we've known each other long enough where I could just ask you for like, John, how is this a horror film? And he said, do you seriously believe any of those other kids got out of there alive?
Yeah, they definitely did it. I don't think they did. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, at the very least, Augustus Gloop didn't make it.
Yeah.
There's no way he saw the light of day ever again. So
Yeah.
I'll let him roll with that.
That's
When
awesome.
all us kids that saw that in the theater, when he starts to sing, we have no earthly way of knowing, every kid in that theater was terrified. That was such an off-kilter performance. Even like an 11-year-old could pick up that this was
Hmm.
not a normal kid flick.
Yes.
I would argue at the very least the boat ride qualifies as horror.
Oh
The
yeah.
which one? I'm sorry.
Boat ride.
Oh, wait, boat ride?
Yeah, oh sorry,
Oh, the boat.
boat ride in Willy Wonka
Yes.
Got it.
with that weird song Mr. Weatherford just referenced, and
Yeah.
the chicken getting its head cut off, and it's just it's
I don't know. If I were like with a bunch of kids in a boat and there's an adult man just singing songs, I think I'd be freaked out as well. I don't know if I want to be on that boat. I think I'd be a little freaked out. Um, awesome. So I know you mentioned how you, Professor, how you selected some of the contributors. These are folks that you've known for a while.
Mhm.
Did you use any other criteria to decide, in terms of like, uh, I guess for choosing the essays? Like, did somebody submit something and you're like, you know what, this is good, but I'm not sure it fits with the theme of the book, and maybe this is good for something else? Or was it just like they already knew what it was that they were supposed to submit? You looked at it, looked good.
I've been very blessed.
Mhm.
I with the people. I mean, it's like any other writing process. I've sent drafts back with notes, and you need to emphasize this and reorganize that. But thankfully, 4 books in, and wow, well over 100 essays. I've never had somebody just completely miss. Thank God.
yet.
Luis, I'm not hearing you.
Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I
That's okay.
realized that I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
But I was gonna mention that's good that you haven't had that issue. And if you had, I'm assuming that you would probably have Mike Lafferty handle those conversations. Maybe, I don't know.
No, no, I'm the writer wrangler. That's
Oh,
that's
okay,
all
got it.
me. I got to take something off that man's plate. So
Yeah,
I deal with the fragile egos and the tender emotions because I've been there. I've
you've
been
been
there.
there. You've been the other side.
Yes.
Awesome.
I don't have any contacts in Teamsters. I don't make phone calls to arrange this. I don't do any of that stuff. So.
Yeah. What do you think? This question is for Mike Weatherford. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name.
Oh, that's it. You got it.
Okay, awesome. Do you think there are any, I guess, in the context of, the first book about transgressive horror, excuse me, uh, movies that broke the rules, do you think there are any particular directors that you think exemplify this? Like these folks are always inventing new stuff, like John Carpenter or anybody else.
I think a lot of it is relative to its time period. I kind of same as you. I thought like, well, when you hear the title, it's all going to be all Cronenberg or all these kind of David Lynch or these weird things. But transgressive is sort of loosely applied definition, and in a good way. I mean, just talking about what I did for the new one, I talked about The Howling and An American Werewolf in London, and
Hmm.
I don't think anybody watched them now would apply transgressive to the title, but back in 1981. Uh, it was a blend of humor and horror that we didn't really have horror comedies as a branded kind of genre. So that was a real unsettling kind of weird mix. And Landis had a real hard time selling American Werewolf. The studios was like, I don't get it. It's scary and it's funny? And he's like, exactly. Yeah, it's both. And the dream sequences that just pop in and jolt you out of your seat, later, the whole basis for Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So just those movies in their day were transgressive, and I think the series, if there's kind of a through line, each essay kind of points out why they were at the time, even if you don't see them that way now.
For sure. So it's not necessarily directors per se. Yes, there might be directors that push the envelope, obviously, but it's more like a sign of the times. Like I think earlier, Professor, you were mentioning about how certain tropes are now people like scoff at them and roll their eyes, but
Mhm.
at one point, Halloween, for example, uh, is like kind of set a little bit of the final girl, the mass killer, the whatever the tropes are. Maybe even if it's not Halloween, but certain films already laid the foundation for some of those, and it basically
Black
created a new
Christmas.
way of looking. Black Christmas, yeah, that actually, you're right. And I was talking about this with a friend because we were talking about Friday the 13th, which comes out next week, the episode at least,
Mhm.
and how the movie itself is, yes, it borrows a lot from like Halloween and maybe even Black Christmas, but there's a lot of like almost shot by shot of A Bay of Blood. I don't know if you've seen that movie. There's a lot like Friday the 13th kind of just like steals from that, but I just thought it was a little funny. Um, Maybe not relevant to anything that we're just talking about right now. Um, is there a specific film that you did not include in the previous book that you wish you had included, or is it something that you're like, you know what, this is fit perfectly. This is good for like maybe the second book or something.
Well, I'm very blessed that my writers like me and respect me enough that they will, a few of them will come to me and say like, I have no inspiration here. Can you throw some titles out there? And the one film that I keep throwing out there that sadly nobody has ever picked up yet is I would love for somebody to tackle the 1971 feature, The Velvet Vampire,
Hmm.
because for me, it's worth talking about for two reasons. It is a film made by the very first female graduate of the Directors Guild, Stephanie Rothman, who I think is just incredibly underrated. Her
Hmm.
ability to be handed like a total, somewhat sleazy exploitation premise and to make and to fulfill what the backers wanted to see, but also to give you a lot more layered and in-depth movie than you were expecting. She doesn't have a large body of work, but you can say that about her entire catalog. And
Hmm.
this is an example of that. And the other thing that I appreciate, and the fact that you have this pioneering woman director who manages to throw in like arty touches that I'm sure just confused the dentists that bankrolled this film. Like there's an extended dream sequence in the desert with like these giant mirrors. And it's just it's almost like saying, see, I went to film school, but it's stuff
Yeah.
you don't find in drive-in movies. And also it's every traditional gothic vampire movie that you've ever seen, like all the beats, all the developments, but it's set aggressively in 1971 and the gender roles are completely flipped. The female
Yeah.
the long-lived debaucherous vampire is female and she has her eyes on a blonde-haired, empty-headed, muscly guy, and his only hope is his way more sensible girlfriend who has to
Hmm.
go rescue him. And it sounds like something you would pitch in 2024, but it's in 1971. And again, it does it true to the period. There's nothing that anybody would do a special podcast to yell girl boss for 50 minutes at it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's such an unusual film for its time, and it again sing the praises of Stephanie Rothman and talk about how this film was doing it in 1971. And next book, I may just have to write about it myself because I can't get anybody to pick that one up.
Yeah, so it's called The Velvet Vampire.
Velvet Vampire, yes.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. I'm curious about that because there are definitely a lot of films that I've seen I have on
Mhm.
my watch list on Letterboxd, and I'm like, I'm definitely gonna get to this. I'm definitely gonna get to this, and then I'm bored on on a
Yeah.
Saturday night or whatever, and I go through my Letterboxd and I go to the trusty old typical movies that I've seen for a
Yes.
while.
Oh yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
Awesome. When it comes to the well, the first three books actually,
Mhm.
what do you think are some of the challenges that you faced when it came to the editing the essays and how did you overcome some of these issues?
Um, Blessedly, we have avoided very, very, very serious issues. I guess the only thing that rose the level of challenge is one thing that we've done on all the campaigns is we have a reward level where uh people can give us a list of their favorite movies and we promise to write about one of them.
Hmm.
And there have been some times where I get a sense that the person that gave us a nice large donation is looking for a particular thing. And there have been a time or two where I've had to say, what you have is great. Could we add to it maybe another 500 words of what the nice person who made our book possible is looking for here?
Yeah.
So, it's made a good thing even better. But it's blessedly never been anything more serious than that. Knock knock, fake wood.
Yeah. Fake wood. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of context on that. Um, Mike Weatherford, I know that you were part of the I think you said you were part of the Fantastic Flops, is that correct? And you were part of the other book as well?
Right, the sci-fi and flops. I wasn't in time for the first horror book.
And which one did you mention earlier? There you go. We have the books
There
on
you go.
I definitely need to
Props,
look.
baby.
Props, exactly. Which book were you mentioning earlier that you were I think we were talking about this earlier. I think it was a sci-fi one, or was it the Fantastic Flops?
Well, I guess I mentioned both. Sci-fi is the one where I guess I kind of knew what to expect, for lack of a better word, which was other Mike actually mentioned this earlier. It kind of brings back, I'm kind of a nerd that like I have like Pauline Kael collected book,
Wow.
film criticism, all the way up to the new Tarantino's cinema speculation. So I still just love that. And even though I totally get why people would be like, why do you want to read about movies? You can just watch any movie you want to
Yeah.
watch and make up your own mind now. It's not the 70s anymore. But
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm not big in, uh, I'm pretty much a stranger to role playing games and that whole
Hmm.
world. And so in sci-fi, I was amazed, because most of the writers come from that background and just their depth of knowledge and the insight they had into the sci-fi movies. But unless I go back and reread, I didn't see that kind of level of personal connection and flops surprised me because I grew up on stuff like the making fun of bad movies, like the Golden Turkey Awards and things like,
Yeah.
and to see that uh, in flops, people kind of went the other way. They kind of adopted these movies and they were like champions of them. And like, no, if that Flash Gordon movie really wasn't bad, it was great. And I loved reading that. I love a super long essay about the weird monkeys counterculture movie called Head. And like we screened that in college and we called it a bad movie festival, and it was like a so-called midnight movie. And
Yeah.
I was like, man, this guy that wrote this is really really explains it and really makes you take it seriously and listen to it, and that's kind of the through line through that book. That's people really like championing these movies.
Yeah, I I get that, believe me. Like I've read tons of articles. And I definitely need to read these two books. So I'll make sure to post them, but I definitely interested in the Fantastic Flops one and how people can maybe, change your perspective a little bit or at least help you see something differently. But Professor,
Yes.
how much money would it take for you to retroactively have me include Leprechaun 2 Back in the Hood or whatever as like a uh transgressive horror film?
Well, funny you mention that because
Yeah.
we have a number of those pick your own film backer levels. So yeah, not don't want to feel like I'm twisting your arm, but I'm
Yeah,
just saying you back if you were just
yeah.
happen to back us at that level, we would be obligated to do Leprechaun 2, do Sharknado 3, whatever your pleasure is, we yes sir, we'll be happy to write about that film.
You heard that, listeners. Make sure you click on the link and submit at the appropriate level and submit Killer Clowns, Leprechaun 2, Jason Goes to Hell, whatever you want. Uh,
I developed a very great relationship with novelist Alex Bledsoe because
mhm.
the very first backer essays we got was for the Japan horror classic. I'm probably going to pronounce it Noroi, the Curse,
Yeah.
and the whole horror is the tedium of it. That's the
Mhm.
horror, the tedium. And Alex not only made it through it, he came up with one of my favorite titles. And the title of his essay is Nori the Curse, that takes its fucking time.
Actually, I did see that. Actually, I did read that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
very
So
interesting.
we will even watch deliberately tedious movies for you folks. It's the
Oh.
least we can do for you for making our books happen.
Yeah, I have that on my watch list. So I actually now I maybe I should just read the article again and just be like, you know what, this is good enough for me. Um, I know
We
one
do
thing.
have,
Oh, go ahead.
we do have 3 of those slots left on this Kickstarter, but there's not a lot of time.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for letting me know. Listeners, make sure you maybe it'll be done actually by the time we release this episode. So that'd be great news. On a more serious note, I know that I don't remember if it was on the podcast that you were previously on, or if it was on the YouTube video, which is also a podcast. Those are the only two I saw. But you mentioned about how there was somebody from the Ukraine who bought the book.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just found that story very moving. Because like at the end of the day, horror, whether people like to believe it or not, it is a community. And can you talk a little bit about that for those who have not heard of this story?
Yes. We got a very, very, very nice note after we put the first one out from a gentleman who is in Ukraine right now, and he was very, very complimentary about the book, which is always, a wonderful thing to have happen. But he also talked about how one of the wonderful things about this book is that, a lot of times due to the shelling and the missile attacks and everything, you're in a bomb shelter and maybe you have power, maybe you don't, maybe you're operating on candlelight. And he talked about how the books were extra special to him because it's like even when we don't have electricity and we can't get your laptops, you got to say it's the charge is gone, but as long as you have a candle, he said, I can read your books and I can see the movies in my mind and and see it from your perspective. And I just, I mean, any doubts that I had that I was on the about being on the right path with these books were immediately erased. I realized we were doing something other than just amusing ourselves. And honestly, every time we do a new book, I am checking the backer list just to make just I mean, it's not that I want his money. It's just if he's contributing, even if it's like $1, I know he's okay. I know he's still
Mhm.
out there. And it's wonderful that we can bring any amount of comfort or solace to people in just unspeakably horrible circumstances like that. And that was one of many special moments I've had since doing this. That's the tops.
Yeah,
That's
I would think so. I think a lot of people don't realize when you're working on whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a movie or an essay or a
mm,
song or anything like that,
mm,
you don't realize how you touch people and how you inspire people. And
mm.
I thought that that story was very beautiful.
Thank you.
And obviously, seeing somebody consistently donate is always a good sign, not only because it helps the
Yes.
project, but mainly because you know that specific for this situation that they are
Yes.
safe and they're
And
still out there.
he won't take free books. I'm
Yeah.
like, please let me see some books. Like, no, 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 you need the money so you can make more. And I'm like, no, you need the books because you're going through things I can't even imagine. But he won't take my free books. I
Yeah. Yeah. Well, shout out to this person. I hope
yes,
everything is better.
yes,
Hope so. And
yes.
hopefully he receives a signed copy maybe of the new book,
Oh,
which
I offered, he wouldn't take
you wouldn't
it.
take it. Okay, okay. Well, I guess this is a good transition on to the new book a little bit. I know we touched on it here and there throughout
Yes.
the podcast, but can you tell me about the new book, Transgressive Horror Resurrected, more reflections on scare films that broke the rules, and how it fits as a companion piece, potentially to the first book?
Well, one thing that I mean, you can't plan on this sort of thing, but I was struck by just the different pool of writers. I mean, we've had some people, we've been very blessed to have them on all four projects, but sometimes life interferes, or I do have one or two writers that just don't care for horror at all. And I was just amazed that, like, even though it's me, it's my company, it's obviously a branded sequel, but just how much turnover there was between the two. There are like so many authors in number four that weren't there for number one.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I mean, I pride myself on the diversity of the voices that we're able to put into these books, but this is not completely, but a surprisingly different crew than we had on the first one.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't imagine. I mean, it's like from the first book to right now, I don't know how many years have passed. I guess during COVID this happened, like, when you conceived the idea,
Been in the works for three.
3 years.
At least for three. Oh yeah, yeah. Because no, wait, four. I'm going with four. Four is my final answer. There we go.
There you go. Wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
I'm social studies. Math was never my thing.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you so much for giving me an idea what that is. I was gonna ask you a little bit about what that process was in terms of like retaining the same writers and everything, but it seems like you mentioned, like people either dropped off or you found new writers.
Mhm.
Mike Weatherford, I know that you were part of the two previous books, Fantastic Flops and the uh subversive sci-fi.
Subversive. Yes.
Yes. And now you're part of this new book, correct?
Yes.
And then can you tell me a little bit about, you don't have to go far too into detail, but can you remind me again of the piece that you wrote for this new book?
I did the one about my two werewolf movies from
Yes.
college age, The Howling and American Werewolf in London. And
Yeah.
that's
And for that one, did you already have an idea of what you wanted to talk about, or when Professor reached out to you, you were like, "Oh, I know exactly what to say," or I'm assuming you've been thinking about these things already.
a little bit. Part of it, I like a challenge, and if he'd said like pick a title out of the hat and write about it, I would have dug that. But I kind of like worked around what was already taken. But the subversive sci-fi I wrote about, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, and so I think the connection there is I wanted to go back and watch something really beloved from teenage childhood and see it with new eyes, something I haven't seen in a long time,
Hmm.
and kind of break it down on those tough questions. Does it still hold up? Is it still, are you embarrassed that you loved it so much? That kind of stuff. And that I I don't know what works for everybody else, but that's was kind of what worked for me. I wanted to see something that I kind of grew up with, for lack of a better word.
And what is the final verdict? Do they hold up?
They do. It's in strange ways. You have to remind yourself that there was no internet, and the so-called fan service. That both these directors were guys that grew up on the Universal creature features and were kind of the first era of fandom, and they both really throw that into the movie, and especially in The Howling with all the in jokes and the cameos and all the kind of winking that hey, I'm closer to your age than the guys that made the old school horror movies that worked for the studios and didn't necessarily have an affinity for the movies one way or another. It was just, I'm showing up to work, I'm directing this movie. Well, these young guys, they grew up living, breathing the Universal and the Hammer movies, and they stuffed all that into the movies. The uh, the part, the irony of them both is that at the time, the werewolf transformations in both movies were what you went home talking about. They were just jaw dropping. They were just done in live time, and they weren't camera dissolves where they'd stop the camera and glue more hair on the guy's face and then start it again. And it was the first time you hadn't seen that. And for better or for worse, it's now you kind of like, boy, it's taken this guy a long time to turn into a werewolf.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember reading somewhere about like, way before the internet age of like you can access almost everything and anything. You had to, like, a lot of people would just like buy Fangoria. I don't know when Fangoria came out, so I'm not gonna, assume, but people would read because that's when they would interview like the special effects folks or the practical effects folks and whatnot. And so I can't even imagine growing a child of the 80s, 90s, high school in the 2000s, then that's when it started hitting the internet type stuff. So it was easier for me to like see more stuff, I guess. But man, I would love to just like have experienced that myself and just be like away from internet culture and all that type of stuff and just be part of that, taking everything in. Um, and the only ways you could take it in,
It, yeah, it
right?
was weird. It was weird getting your information from these magazines, and the makeup special effects guys were rock stars. They were on the cover of Fangoria, and I explained in the essay for people that this isn't old hat. There's this overlap between the two movies because Rick Baker was had been waiting for Landis to make American Werewolf for years, and then The Howling got funded first, and he was like, okay, I'll do that one since your movie is never going to get off the ground. And then it did. Landis is like, we got the job. And so he had to give Howling over to a protege, Rob Bottin, later famous, for The Thing and lots of other movies.
Mhm.
And so then Baker was kind of pissed off because all this revolutionary stuff with the air bladders and all this stuff done in live camera where the skin pops because you're pumping air into this little condom or something, like all that was in The Howling, which came out first.
Yeah.
And so Baker wasn't happy about that, but
Yeah,
that's Hollywood,
that's Hollywood. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. Before we kind of get to the end of the interview, I did want to ask maybe an opinion for all three of you. Is there a movie post, from 2020 to right now that you think would fit into the this category, like of films that basically broke the rules in whatever way you think would make sense?
Hmm.
And you can think about it.
Hey,
I know
so
it's like
that
right on the
speaks okay.
spot.
I'm chewing this one over.
Yeah, of course. There's like um let's see.
Well, I can go with one fresh in my mind.
Okay.
Um, we caught the debut film from Zoe Kravitz, Blink Twice,
Hmm.
and for a first film, there's a lot of remarkable elements to it.
Hmm.
I don't know what her particular influences would be, but it's sort of like mostly like this bougier version of I Spit on Your Grave.
Hmm.
It also has like a little bit of Witchfinder General and Star Trek Five for flavor.
Yeah.
But the one thing the film got me to thinking about was horror at its best is about what scares us, and that's inherently about something illogical. I mean, if the things that traditionally frighten us, like vampires and werewolves, make no logical sense.
Hmm.
But you don't something doesn't need to be real or even plausible for it to scare you. And the thing about Blink Twice was I mean, to the extent that we can know these things and study them, the chance that a young woman is going to have somebody spike her drink or otherwise take horrible advantage of her is relatively low. But I mean, how many times does it have to happen before every woman develops a justifiable fear of it?
Hmm.
And Blink Twice, it sort of taps into that as a pure fear. Yes, this situation is incredibly far-fetched and incredibly implausible, but it's based on a very real fear that horror hasn't really tapped into yet.
Hmm.
Just how utterly terrifying it can be to be a woman in the year 2024.
Yeah.
That aspect of it I really appreciated. And I think my ultimate thought of it was like, yes, people can argue this is statistically improbable, but like if vampires and werewolves were real, how many of them would it take before you were seriously freaked out? Would you take any comfort in that? Well, there's only 10 of them.
Yeah.
And it speaks to how a fear is utterly real even to the person that feels it. And I thought the film was excellent bringing up those elements.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess if we're comparing it to anything as well, it's kind of like, but there's no comparison actually. I was gonna say like Bigfoot, but it has no idea. Walk with me here. The Bigfoot part of this where I'm going is like where you said like there's 5, 10 vampires. Like, what are the chances I'm gonna bump into any of these anyway, right? Or as a woman, this is a real high chance of like you going to a bar, you going anywhere of just
Yeah.
being, you know, targeted. I haven't seen the film, so I'll definitely keep an eye out for that one. I know I've seen the trailers for it for sure. How about you, Mike Weatherford? Is there a film? And again, it doesn't have to be like they're not maybe breaking the rules, but maybe it's a movie that you just saw that you're like, you know what, this I can see how impactful this movie could be, uh, because it, it's doing something a little different.
Yeah, I think Professor and me maybe both kind of stalled a little bit because it's a tough question because there's really nothing that hasn't been done on screen in the terms of how disgusting or depraved you
Mm.
can be now. So I think the transgressive things are the ideas now, and certainly what you can kind of say. And obviously, at least the first two Jordan Peele movies, Get Out and
Yeah.
Us, what they said about race. And then I would throw in along those lines, Sorry to Bother You,
Mm.
because you don't realize it's a horror movie until like the last third. It's like it starts off as kind of this satire and this comedy, and it just keeps taking a left turn and then another left turn and then another
Yeah.
left turn. And no spoilers, but you're like, holy shit, what am I watching here by the time it's over?
I haven't seen that film either, but and I promise you I do see movies. But all my former coworkers all were like recommending the movie because it was kind of related to what we would do in an old job, but different lifetime that I had. So everybody was always recommending that movie as well.
Yeah, the old expression about like satire died on Saturday night, or that
Yeah.
like there, I kind of agree with a lot of people that say satire died in the Trump era because reality has just become so
Too
weird you can't
ridiculous.
satirize it anymore. So Sorry to Bother You, it starts out and it's this funny premise, and and you're like, yeah, this movie's it's good, it's solid, but it feels kind of 10 years ago, I don't know. And then it just keeps like literally as he ascends the floors of the office building, when he keeps getting promoted, the thing just keeps getting stranger and weirder and stranger until you're like, okay, now I get what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I think I felt that way as again, haven't seen the movie and I'm just visualizing what this would be, but I had no idea what Everything Everywhere All at Once was going to be about, and I just walked in blind. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Until I realized, like, oh, this is like a multiple parallel universe, almost meta, everything. It was really fun. I love the movie, but I just like walked into that movie and not and I'm not a big what do you call it? Marvel person, so I hadn't seen any of the you know, parallel whatever, the Endgame Avengers or whatever where they get taken to another world or something. But still interesting. First thing for me, I guess, I haven't really paid attention to any of those types of themes. And I guess for me, not necessarily breaking rules, but maybe breaking rules in the sense that we don't give a fuck if the movie is not making any money. If we have a small cult following, we're gonna make a bunch of sequels. And that for me was Horror in the High Desert. I don't know if you've all seen that. It's like a mockumentary slash found footage type film. I think it's on Tubi or
Oh.
um somewhere, but it's a story about somebody who goes into the desert
Are there
and
sequels to that already?
excuse me?
I was Googling that and I came up with Horror in the High Desert, both two and three.
Yeah, there's part
Oh,
1, 2, and 3.
oh.
And it was one of the only times that I was watching a movie where I was eating my flower seeds real slowly because I was like so entranced with the movie and it was like really creepy. But I guess where it broke the rules for me is just more of like, who is seeing this? Who's watching this? Because why are there 3 sequels now? I mean, I personally enjoyed them, but I just hadn't heard about these before. I just stumbled upon them on Tubi or something. How about you, uh second mic? Sorry.
Yeah, other mic. Yeah, my wife called me that too, and it's very awkward. I don't have a great answer, unfortunately, because from just looking at horror movies since 2020, the two I like the best are very conventional horror comedies. They're good horror comedies. They're not breaking any rules. So I was going to go with Renfield, because I like Nicolas Cage hamming it up, and it's It could be better, but they do a pretty good job of making Renfield a relatable character that you're rooting for, and most of the jokes land.
Yeah.
Megan, just because it's campy and fun, and you don't get enough. I don't know. It seems like every.
That's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that's a really good, honestly, entry to horror for like people of the, growing up right now. Like a Megan, a PG-13. There's not a lot of blood and gore, but you can kind of get the idea. And it's
Yeah.
also like, as people might shit on it or whatnot, but I think it's actually genuinely funny. Especially if you're higher drunk and watching it. I think it could be fun.
I think there's an awful lot of media today that's designed with the idea that a good percentage of our audience is probably going to be in an altered state when they're watching
So let's do a back-to-back of that and Cocaine Bear. But I am not advocating for cocaine, guys. So please don't. Awesome.
This
So
podcast is not responsible for any poor life
uh
make as a result of our recommendations.
exactly. I'll insert like a disclaimer right here. Awesome. I guess last couple of questions. Professor, can you tell me a little bit about the Kickstarter, the new book? And what do you want, I guess, readers to know about this new collection of essays?
Well, if I have one skill in life, I have very, very talented friends, and 34 of my most amazingly talented friends, coming from an incredibly diverse range of backgrounds, are all raving about horror films that you absolutely need to see. This we didn't plan it. This book kind of went in clusters more than the rest of them. Like three of us all decided to do Hammer films. Uh,
Hmm.
Mike is a big Hammer fan, I know. But we wound up covering the original ones, Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, and then I wound up taking one of the more misbegotten later Frankenstein sequels, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell,
Hmm.
and they book in very nicely because you get two people telling you why Hammer is still something that people talk about. Uh, you know, 50 years after they made their last horror film, and then I came in to talk about one of the last ones, like, why did Hammer fall apart? It's a lovely bookend. And we for Godzilla fans, we cover the two Godzilla films that you most want to read about. We covered both Shin Godzilla and Godzilla minus one. That's how timely this book is. We took some amazing detours, like talking about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The phenomenally talented Chloe Maviel is doing Gaspar Noé's Climax, which, when she said, I asked her, how's that a horror film? She said, well, if you're a type of person who likes to go to certain clubs and ingest certain chemicals, this is a very real horror film to you.
Oh
And
shit,
I'm
I'm in
like,
trouble. I'm in
write
trouble.
that, write
I
that.
just
I
get it.
told her, write that. We cover both ends of the Cronenberg family. Matthew Dawkins covers Shivers, which Cronenberg pair David actually got the Canadian government to fund. I've
Oh.
always wondered, like, how open was he about his raping parasite worm movie with those the Ministry of Terror of gory films or whatever. And
Yeah.
Tim Thompson covers his son Brandon's more recent Antiviral, which
Hmm.
has the same creepy Cronenberg family things to talk about today's celebrity culture.
Hmm.
And yeah, but and we do our share of the classics. The incomparable Winter Jay is back to talk about aliens, and a great fresh perspective on that. The amazing Lisa Morton, the real life ghost hunter, I have writing for me, and multi-time past Horror Writers Association president. She's going back. She's doing a film who I'll probably butcher the title, Hassan, and
Okay.
she said, I want to write about a film where a line of witches literally lines up to kiss Satan's ass. And by the way, did I mention this was made in 1922?
Oh shoot. I think
So
yeah, that's
write that,
interesting.
write that.
Yeah, that 1922. This is like pre-Hays Code, I guess. People just like
Yes,
this like went wild as fuck, and then the Hays Code came and they're like, fuck, now we have to be creative.
exactly, exactly. So if you're into silence, we got you covered. You're into Godzilla, we got you covered. And I guarantee you, you will find a number of films that you're going to want to track down and see. And even if it's a film that may be familiar to you, like Shivers, a lot has been written about Cronenberg's body of work, Shivers in particular, I guarantee you you will see some things in there that you never noticed before. That because that's the kind of people I'm blessed to have working with me. And really, seriously, if you're the kind of person where one of the things you wish you could do more in life is sit around and watch wild movies with your really cool friends. Well, I think we all wish we could do more of that. Well, hey, if that's not available, here you go. Pick up one of our books. You got a whole book full of really cool friends with really cool observations about enjoyably out there movies. And by the way, you'll also be supporting independent creators, independent voices. We use no AI. We use no Chat GPT, and we never will. So
Yeah, that's good to hear.
if you believe in real human beings talking about real movies with real feelings and real insight, we're the kind of company that's the beginning of our mission statement. So if you want to keep real writers alive, please toss us a few bucks. We could use it.
For sure. No, totally. And I will post this, but can you share the where people can find your Kickstarter?
tinyurl.com/ghost show THR will take you directly to Kickstarter.
Awesome. So that's tinyurl.com / ghosts. Oh, excuse me. Ghost show THR. And I will post it on all my social medias. I'll also post it on the show notes of the podcast and everything. Well,
thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Chris, Mike, and Mike, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And I love that you guys are talking about the independent work that you are doing. I think that's very important, especially in the day of AI, as you mentioned. Everybody just wants the easy way out, or they just want to read something really fast or whatever. And like, this is a really important thing that you're doing. Can you tell folks where they can find you if you want them to find you, like on social media or online or anything like that?
Well, I'm more of the social media hermit of them all. You can find most of my stuff on Facebook. You can search for Ghost Show Press. We'll come right up. But it's Facebook, yada yada. Ghost Show Boss. Just look for the ghost and look for the old monster movie posters, and you'll be right at home. And we'll keep you up to date on everything that we're doing now and everything we'll be doing in the future. Hopefully, talking about Volume 5 before too long.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, and I'd be happy to have you all back on the podcast.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then Mike Weatherford, if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about your previous writings or previous projects that you've been a part of or future projects, where can they find you?
I'm still on the Twitter reluctantly from my days as a Las Vegas entertainment columnist. On Facebook, I have a personal Facebook, but I also created a group page for my pandemic lockdown project, the comic book series Drive-In Kings of 1977. So if you type that title in, you'll get my Facebook group page, and that's where I've kind of diverted. There it is.
There you go.
Diverted a lot of my nerd movie type stuff over to that. So.
That's awesome. And if you want to come back on the podcast and talk a little bit about that, let me know. Feel free to reach out. I did see it on Facebook, so I'll make sure to share those as well.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, and Mike Lafferty, do you have anything? Do you want people to find you at all? Period. You're like, no, I don't look for me. I don't know.
I'm just hiding in this dark bunker here in Colorado. I'm fine. I got my MREs. I'll be okay.
Okay.
They can't get me here. Facebook.com/Fanning Games. When I'm not helping Chris publish anthologies, I do some quirky role-playing games. Our biggest hit of the last few years, not counting Chris's anthologies, is Cocaine Owlbear. You'll laugh, you'll cry, it'll become a part of you.
Yeah.
It's available for less than $5. So yeah, check us out. It's a good time.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everybody for being on the podcast, and more than happy to have you back on.
Thank you, sir.
Love that.